Hello and welcome to Plenary News, our roundup from the European Parliament's latest full session here in Strasbourg. Well, we hear a lot of doom and gloom about the EU these days and criticism about a lack of leadership. So step forward European Commission President José Manuel Barroso, who in a combative speech to MEPs has set out his vision for a more stable and prosperous future for the EU and for its citizens. Barroso, who's from the EPP political family, was making his annual State of the Union address to Parliament. But rather than concentrate solely on what's gone wrong, he presented a series of ideas about how to put things right. And the common thread running through these suggestions: more Europe, more integration and more urgency.
We are now in a transition, in a defining moment, and this moment requires decision and leadership. Yes, globalization demands more European unity. More unity demands more integration. More integration demands more democracy, European democracy. In Europe, this means, first and foremost, accepting that we are all in the same boat. It means recognizing the commonality of our European interests. It means embracing the interdependence of our destinies. And it means demanding a true sense of common responsibility and solidarity.
For the EPP, our group's chairman, Joseph Daul, responded with a ringing endorsement of Mr Barroso's prescription for Europe's ills and hailed the EPP political family as leading the way out of the crisis.
The governments that are reforming the most, they belong to our political family. Unlike some, we have understood the gravity of the situation. We know that our economies are in trouble, and to make things better, we need a complete solution that must start by changing our past habits.
And Mr Daul ended with a rallying cry to EU leaders to agree once and for all on a strategy for emerging from the crisis.
We have a need for a real political Europe where more than ever the European Parliament plays its role representing Europe's citizens. If we miss this deadline, we'll be heading for failure. Political union brings legitimacy and democratic control. It means more participation by citizens. That's the Europe I believe in.
The onus is now on member states to respond to Mr Barroso's call to action. Now, one of the consequences of the crisis has been a substantial rise in the cost of living, and energy is no exception. Energy efficiency is therefore being prioritised more than ever at EU level. And this week, MEPs have given their approval to a plan to enhance energy-saving measures across the Union. Last year, the Commission set out ambitious plans for energy efficiency, and 3 months ago a deal was finally struck between Parliament and Member States. The legislation specifies that energy distributors will have to save 1.5% of their sales volumes annually. The legislation will also oblige national governments to refurbish at least 3% of their buildings to higher efficiency standards every year. Energy Commissioner Günther Oettinger said he hoped the legislation would encourage member states to work harder at energy efficiency.
Aber nicht nur dies. Wir bauen auch darauf, dass es Mitgliedstaaten gibt.
We want to make sure that member states do more than the minimum. I think a contest would be a good idea. I think it would be great if we could measure the situation over 2, 3, 4 years. Member states not only implementing European legislation, but exceeding it. I want to launch a competition to name the best member state in terms of energy efficiency, beyond simply what is required in European law.
Der in Sachen Energieeffizienz mehr tut, als europarechtlich notwendig.
The EPP Group's spokesman on this directive is German MEP Markus Pieper. He welcomed the fact that our group had been able to make the Commission's proposal more realistic and less complicated.
I'm glad that the Commission and the Greens have had to adjust their utopian wishful thinking to the reality of public finances and high energy prices. In summary, this directive means less European bureaucracy, more flexibility and autonomy for member states, and for the environment it's a great result.
But MEPs also won a concession to ensure that the requirements of the directive should not stand in the way of creating economic growth. Many of us have been victims of crime, and if not, we know people who have been. However, until now, the EU has paid very little attention to victims of crime. Most focus has been on the perpetrators. That's going to change thanks to a package of measures agreed this week that will finally put victims first. 18 months ago, the European Commission proposed a directive aiming to harmonise the different judicial systems across the EU with regard to victims' rights. Parliament's response to the Commission's plan has been led by an EPP group member from Spain, Teresa Jiménez Becerril, who has acted as rapporteur on the draft directive. For her, supporting the victims of crime is one of the reasons she became an MEP, and she knows what it's like because her brother and his wife were murdered by terrorists 14 years ago.
There are 75 million of victims each year in Europe. Unfortunately, everybody can be a victim. And for me, because I'm a victim myself, I'm very involved in my country. And when I came here, I knew I had to do it, so I moved it. And I think, fortunately, we are almost finished.
The directive has also been a priority for Viviane Reding, the Commissioner responsible for justice and fundamental rights. In her view, the new legislation reflects the values and priorities of the EPP political family, of which she is a member.
Now the victims are taken serious, their problems are on the table, and they are not victimized a second time. That is a clear step forward, not only in Europe, also at the national level. And I think it's important that the EPP Commissioner, the EPP members are behind of this and say, we are for the people in Europe, and we demonstrate that we are.
Member States have 3 years to implement the provisions of the directive. Well, for the time being, that's all from the European Parliament here in Strasbourg. We'll be back in October. But until then, you can find out more about the activities of Europe's largest and most influential political force, the EPP Group, on our website, eppgroup.eu. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon.